I want to start with one of the easier ones to work on. Yeah, no, I got it. Hold on. I'll get there. So we will open Vondelpark Pano. Because I want to give you some of the basics of what I talked about in the presentation. Here's the image as I shot it. And you notice, if you do, that it's brought into Adobe Camera Raw first, because it's an older shot, an older format, and Adobe Photoshop has been updated in a number of ways. So this image came in and said, do you really want to open it this way? Yes. So down at the bottom, in the lower right, I open image, and it takes it into Photoshop. I have the image in Photoshop. I want to just talk about the things that we went through in the presentation. Here's as it was shot. Interesting image, sort of flat light. I would like to just simply increase the saturation of the colors. Up in the top left, or top right rather, the adjustments, you see now a number of different adjustments I can do. First one is brightness contrast. Second one is levels, which is I really like a lot. The next one is curves. The second row, first one, is hue saturation. So if you bring this into your computer, into Photoshop, and click on the first one in the second row, it brings up the hue saturation. And you notice in the lower right, I now have two layers, the background layer and the hue saturation layer. And the properties in the hue saturation layer, the middle slider, allows me to decrease saturation or increase saturation by moving it to the right. Now look at the difference of that image, and I've done nothing more than to increase the saturation of the whole image. It's not specific to a single part of the image. It adjusts the entire image. That's an adjustment layer. The other thing I will mention is when we had the background layer prior to doing this, let me come up to history. Also, if you click on Windows, if you don't have history, come over to that and click on history, because the history panel is so important to allow you to see how did I open it and what does it look as, how does it look now? So we can keep going back in steps to see the changes that we've made. And the reason that's so good is as we are making changes, our eyes and our mind gets accustomed to the changes, and we don't see the effect anymore of how much we did. We just keep accepting this as the image. Well, that's not how it was brought in. So adjustment layers, no pixels. In this case, we have two layers, and the background layer is the image itself. Now, let me introduce you to the aspect of a mask. You see that little white rectangle next to there's a little chain holding the first part of this adjustment layer. And that you notice there's a little white framing around the circle with the black and white center. That is the properties. If I double click that, it brings up the properties. If I want to do something to the mask, I need to click on the mask. And you see up above, it has a number of things I can do with that mask. But we're going to do something very, 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 very simple, just so you get to understand what a mask does. Remember that white reveals, black conceals. So this white, for this hue saturation, for these colors, it's saying all these colors should be revealed for the entire image. Well, I don't want it for the entire image. Maybe I want it to be only a certain part, and I want to keep back a certain part. So to do that, if you come over to the toolbar on the left, and you pick the brush, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, down. I get the brush, and down at the bottom of the toolbar, these two squares of color are very important. Black, the black one is the foreground color, and the square behind that is called, the first one is called the foreground color, and the one behind that is called the background color. And there's a little bit of a two-way arrow. If I click that, it flips them back and forth. So just keep that in mind. So if I want to conceal a portion of the adjustment, I click on the mask, and you see it now has a little bracketing around it. I get the brush, black in the foreground. I will paint black onto the mask, but I really paint it on the image itself. And so up in the upper left, or up at the top of the screen, that's called the options bar. So the options for this tool is, the mode is normal, and there are all kinds of modes, but we will use normal at this point, just so you know how to use it. And this little white circle, if you do the drop down, that can change the size of the brush, and you can change the hardness. And in this case, I wanted about 65, so I wanted about 3/4 hard edge. And the explanation of that is, if you look at the brush over in the right-hand corner, it's a circle. That's the brush. And here's how it works. If you think of the center of the brush, center of that circle is where the most active part of the brush. And if you have it as a soft brush, then the intensity is less and less and less out to the edge. If I change this brush to pure hardness, and I bring that down, then it will make wherever I'm painting, it will make the same intensity in the middle all the way out to the edge, and you tend to get lines of where you're doing things. So most of the time, I'm using a brush a little less than 100%, maybe 80, and the size can be adjusted here, but it's easier to do it another way. So to get out of this properties panel is just come over somewhere out of the image and click, and that will close that. When I bring down the brush, look in the lower right corner of the image, I have the brush. If you take your bracket key, your right bracket key, the right bracket key, and keep clicking it, makes it larger. If you click the left bracket key, it makes it softer. So just keep in mind, I don't usually teach keyboard shortcuts, because that's not teaching you, it's hard to remember those. So, but this is so easy to use, rather than coming up to the upper left, clicking that bar down, changing the size, and then you can't see what size it is. The numbers don't mean anything to me. If I do come up here and click on this, how do I know what a 94% versus this? I don't know. But if I get out of that and come down and use the right bracket key, I can decide how big I want to make the image. The other thing is, I could go up there and make it softer or harder. Well, if you hold the shift key and you press the right bracket key, it makes it harder. Watch this circle in the upper left. You see how sharp it is all the way around. The left bracket key, while I'm holding the shift key, makes it soft, and you can see what the softness looks like. Remember, the most intense is in the middle, and you see that it's brighter in the middle, and then it fades out to the edges. So a softer brush is usually what I use most of the time. So I'll make it sort of medium. Why do I want to do this? I'm really just doing it to show you how to use a mask to control what's in the image. If I wanted to remove the saturation in this lower right, I would paint on the mask with black. So I come over to the paintbrush on the left side, get the paintbrush, down at the bottom, make sure that black is in the foreground. When you paint with a brush, it always is painting the foreground color. Now I'm painting with black, which means conceal what that adjustment layer is doing. And up at the top also, I just saw, because it wasn't doing it as fast as I thought it should, in the options bar, we talked about the hardness and the softness. Put it at normal, and then the next thing is opacity. And you want that to be 100%. When we get more sophisticated, we may use it at a lower percentage, but for this, I want you to see 100%. So when I paint with black, I'm actually turning off the hue saturation, just in that area. So let me show you history. And you see I now have 2 brush strokes. Oh, when you are using a brush. It's much better to use it a little bit, then stop, do it again, stop, do more, stop, do more, stop, do more. And you see in the history, I'm building up a bunch of brush steps. And the reason to do it that way is because if I do too much and I've only done it with one stroke through the whole thing, then I have to start over. Where this way, I can go to the history panel, go back just one step at a time and see what the difference is, and then go from there forward. So when I'm using brushes, I do them a little bit at a time so that I can go back in history and just undo it. So in this case, it was 100% all the way back. So it's the same all the way. Well, let's go to that one. See the difference? See the difference? See the difference? Okay. So I've turned off the mask, meaning I've turned off hue saturation. I've turned off the adjustment by painting with black, which conceals the adjustment wherever I've painted. If I don't want to do that, which I said, great aspect of the history panel, I said, no, I'll just come back up and click on the modify hue saturation. So it puts it to where it was. Or if I didn't like that at all, and I had this down in there, I could take this and click on it and hit the delete key, or you can bring it down to the garbage can, grab it, and bring it down to the garbage can, and it deletes that layer. But I want to come back to it. So just to show you adjustments, come to adjustments, hue saturation, and I want to increase the saturation overall, almost a little bit too much, just so that you see the aspect of it. If you look in the layers panel, you see that there's a background layer and a hue saturation. Now in this case, just to show again, I click on the mask, get the paintbrush, black in the foreground, and I can turn that mask off just on the tree because, oh, I don't want it to be that gold, but I'd like the saturation everywhere else. So I'm clicking a couple times, stopping, clicking, stopping, clicking, stopping. So that gives you an idea of how a mask controls an adjustment layer, and it gives you an idea of what an adjustment layer is. So now let's have some fun with it. Close this image. You don't need to save it unless you want to, but close that image and open. This is the fun part. Open Captain Davy Jones. Takes it into Adobe Camera Raw, just say open image. Now we are going to play with him. We're going to play with Captain Davy Jones. We're going to play with this image with a technique that I call blurring and zooming the background. But in order to do that, we need to duplicate the image. We need to have 2 pixel layers. So I will take the background layer and bring it down to the tab, the second from the left, from the right side is the duplicate. It will duplicate that. So now I have 2 pixel layers identical. If we're in the system knows which one you're working on by it's being highlighted. You notice the background copy is highlighted. If I click on the background copy, you notice it's highlighted. That's very important. Sometimes when you're working with multiple layers, you try to use a tool and it isn't working. So there's 3 things to look at when a tool isn't working. One is that I click on something that changed the tool that I'm using. Make sure you're still using the same tool. Did I change something in the options bar? No. Am I on the correct layer? And often I bring an adjustment in and it's highlighted, and then I go over and do something with some other tool and it's not doing it. It's because I'm not on the pixel layer and I want to adjust the pixels. So I have to go back and look at the layer palette and click on the pixels. Well, in this case, we have 2 layers, identical pixels. So in the top layer, the background layer, make sure that that's selected. Now I want to show you the clone tool. We are going to zoom this image to make a fun image out of it. But before we do that, I want to remove some of this white on the left-hand side and this white up in the upper right-hand corner. So take the clone tool. And in this case, I don't really care to be very accurate about it. because we will zoom it. You'll see. Just stay with me and you'll see why I mean that I don't need it to be careful. So I have the clone tool and I will make it a little harder than what it is, not entirely hard. And I will, in order to use the clone tool, you put it to where you want to clone from, you hold the Alt key or Option key and click, then you bring it to where you want to clone, and you just start cloning in, and you watch, you see that little plus sign above? That's where it is taking the pixels, and where I'm pasting them is where the brush is. Now, you have to be careful because that little plus sign could, if I come over here and move it too far to the right, it starts getting his hat because that's where it's pulling the pixels from. Well, in that case, you just do it randomly. Come back up, click the Option key again, come down. I want to remove some of this. Click it again up there, come down, remove some more of the highlights. You'll see why I'm doing this is when we do the blur and the zoom. And now just keep removing those. I just wanted some green stuff in the background rather than the bright area. And I'm not even being careful how I'm doing. I just want some color. Then I want to put it over into the upper right. So again, right click, start cloning up in this area, get some more, put it up in here, a little more, maybe some of the black stuff up there. Okay, good. So we've removed all those highlights that are not working for me. Here's another neat aspect of this now. We have the second layer, the background copy layer selected because it's highlighted, and we will come up to filter, come down to blur, no, down to blur, come over and go down to radial blur. And radial blur comes up and it has two options, a spin and a zoom. Click on the zoom and then increase the amount in the upper part of the box. And you see that it's showing me how much the zoom will take place. So I have it up about 67. Watch this square to see how much I want. And then in the middle of there, there's a dot. I move that to where about where his eyes are because I want the zoom to come from that part of the image. Click OK, and look at that zoom. That's really neat. Now, how do I get the face to be sharp? By using a mask on that background copy. So come down to the bottom of the layers palette. The third one, let me see what that is. The 1, 2, 3 from the left is the mask. I click on that, it puts a mask on the background copy layer and it's bracketed, so I know I'll be painting on that mask. Come over and get the paintbrush, black in the foreground, opacity 100%, somewhat soft. Maybe I'll make it a little softer. Hold the Shift key and click on the left bracket key. Now I want to make it bigger. Click on the right bracket key. And if I paint on the mask, white, black conceals. So I will conceal the zoom aspect of this layer and allow the layer below it to show through. So the sharp layer, which is below, will show through. And I just paint where I want that top part to show through. As easy as that. And if I want to soften a little bit of the edge, then I would lower the opacity of my brush up in the options bar at the top, maybe down to 50%, and just paint around the edges. And then it doesn't make it as sharp all the way around. That's still a little high. Come down some and just do some painting around where it will merge it in softly so that it's not so sharp. Now, look at that image. Really an interesting aspect of being creative with the zoom tool, the blur zoom, radial zoom on this image. And I use that on a number of the ones that you saw in the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. That's the power of a mask. That's the power of controlling that particular layer with a mask. Black conceals, white reveals. And if you look at that mask, and if you want to see what the mask really looks like, if you hold the Alt or Option key and click on the mask, it brings it up so you can see it. And you can actually paint more right here while you're looking at it. So I have black. I notice in this middle part here is a little sort of gray. So I'll just paint black more in there to make sure that comes out. And to get it back again, hold the Alt key, Option key, and click on the mask, and you're back. So this technique that we just did really gives you a lot of power of how to control what you're seeing with multiple pixel layers. So let's have just a little fun with this. I'm gonna close this one and open the gout, and if you can bring it in, that's fine. It's the same technique, and you do it later if you want. But here's the image, and I thought, okay, let's just play with it. So I wanted to come up to filter, blur, radial blur. Same thing, put it about where the eye is, about 67, 77, something in there. Put the center where the eyes are, say okay. In this case, I did it to the background layer. Don't want to do that, do I? So go back in history and go back one step to the open. Now I want to duplicate the layer. Bring it down to the bottom. Second from the right, duplicates that layer. Come up to the filter, blur, radial blur, zoom. Zoom is the option, about 70 in the amount. Click OK, and it do exactly what we did with the other one. This top layer, I want to put a mask on it. Third from the left at the bottom, puts the mask on it. The bracket around it means I'm going to work right on that. Get the brush, black in the foreground at the bottom of the toolbar, come over and just paint in where you want it. Now, I have the opacity is very low, so I will raise the opacity so that it's affecting the image more. But if I keep painting, it's adding more of the black each time, or the gray, and I can do it any way I want to do it. Just learn to play with it. Look at the difference of this image and how neat that looks from, here's the original, turn off, oh, over in the layers palette, you see these little eyeball icons. When you turn one off, it turns off the effect of that layer. Turn it back on, you see it there. You also can go up to your history panel and click just before the first brush stroke, and you'll see what I did before there, radial blur, duplicate layer, come on down to the bottom and blur it. Go back up to open, come down to the bottom, shows you what we did with it. Just a lot of fun. I think that really looks pretty neat that way. I'm pleased with that. If you want to save it, go up to File, Save As, and you can change the name. I would just add to it a Lady Laughing #2, and you can save it as a PSD or whatever, but if you do the drop down there, I always choose TIFF or JPEG. And the reason I do TIFF is because it will save the file, the layers. It saves the layers, it doesn't compress it. It'll come up and say, is this what you want? I don't want any compression. I don't want it throwing away pixels. I'm using an IBM PC. You may be using a Mac. That setting really doesn't matter that much. Interleaved, pixel order interleaved is great. And then just say, okay, and it saves the image back to where you brought it in, to whatever folder you had it in when you opened it. Okay, let's move along to the next part here. I want to show you this technique, and then I think we'll do the clouds because we're going to run out of time pretty fast. This is just fun stuff. I'm going to open Santa Fe door. Open that. Open image. And let's turn it into, first of all, let's duplicate it, grab it, drag it down to the second from the right. So now I have 2 pixel layers, same image, and come up to.
Yeah, they were not that long at all. Yeah.
No, I
Image.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 9 minutes, that means starting when they went in and when they came
I
out.
can hear you talking. Please don't. Or mute your microphone. Adjustments.
That long at all. But they
No,
not.
no, that
That was too quick.
yeah, that was too quick. They didn't like anything about it.
Adjustments, black and white.
Oh,
That's how houses work.
oh, I know.
Wait, folks, who's talking?
Can't wait to get out of it.
Change it to black and white. We don't need to adjust all of that. We'll get into those things more. Just want to show you the effect. So here I have two layers. Look at the layer palette. Black and white now is the duplicate layer, and underneath is the color. If I turn off the eyeball on the black and white, you see the color one beneath. Now here's a neat aspect of using a mask. Let's put a mask on the black and white image. So the third from the left at the bottom, puts the mask. And you notice it has a bracket around it. Come over, get the paintbrush, black. So I want to conceal a portion of the black and white so that I see the color image underneath. I'm going to make the brush a little smaller and a little harder by holding the shift key and the right bracket makes it a little bit harder because I want to have some sharp edges when I paint, and the left bracket making it a little smaller. And I start painting on this layer and allowing the bottom layer to come through so that I'm seeing the color come through onto the black and white image only where I'm painting. Stop, start again. Every once in a while, stop, start again. So if you make a mistake, you can just back up. But also, if you make a mistake and go, no, I didn't want that over there. Well, come over to the bottom of your brush, of your tool palette, and put white in the foreground by hitting the double arrow, because white reveals. So if I paint where I messed up with white, I'm revealing the black and white layer, not below. When I paint with black, it's concealing the black and white and allowing the one below. So now I come back to the black and white and continue to paint where I want that color to come through.
John, can I ask you a quick question?
Certainly.
How did you turn that layer to black and white as quickly as you did?
Okay, I'll do it for you. But let me finish this and then
Go ahead.
I'll go up and do that.
Thank you.
So there we have that. Let me come back open, then I duplicated the layer, then I went up to image, at the upper left, the palette, image, adjustments, black and white.
Okay, very good.
And you can adjust these various sliders to change the image, but I just want to show you this technique, so I just say okay. Then I put a mask on this layer, came over and got the paintbrush with black and started painting in through here. That's
got it.
done.
Perfect.
In fact, once you're done painting with this color, you say, oh, yeah, now you have the freedom to do whatever you want. You could, once you're finished painting with this, just the door here, you see I just went over, I'll have to fix that a little bit. Once you've done this one, you may want to work on some of your own, but let me show you this one a little bit more. Let me put the white in the foreground to fix up the little area that I messed up there. There we go. Put black back into the foreground color. Paint where I want. And after I did this the first time, I thought, oh, it might be neat to have this door on the left have color. So I came over to that door, came back up to get the opacity up to 100%, started to paint in this door. Stop a little bit. Every once in a while, stop what you're doing and let it get another layer, another step in the layer history palette. And so I could look at this and you see I've gone over a couple times wrong. So come over and get the white, clean that up a little bit.
John,
Yes.
how, what's the difference between the flow and the opacity? What does flow do?
Flow is how much you want the brush to come out as though you were having almost like an ink brush. They're pretty much the same, unless you're using some of the more sophisticated aspects of the Photoshop and other plugins. So I tend to use opacity. You could use flow instead. So I keep flow at 100% and adjust how much capacity I want by how much I use capacity to determine how much I want it to do something to the image.
Okay.
So you see this one. Let's get out of here. You get the idea. You could go up and save as, save the image so that you can see
Don?
the, yeah.
Bob Casper.
Yeah.
When I'm in Photoshop, I don't have that box on the right that says Adjustments, History, and Properties. I only have a box that says Color and Swatches.
Okay. Up at Window, see at the top in the upper left?
Right?
Window,
Yeah.
click on Properties down at the bottom. Click that.
Okay.
Click on History.
I got
There.
properties. I don't see history.
Up above, it's about halfway down. It's more to the upper part.
Oh, click on both of them. I see. Okay.
Yeah. Because
Gotcha.
each of them are separate.
Okay, but I don't have a tab that says Adjustments.
So
Would
the
that-
window, go up the window. The third one or fourth one down is Adjustments. You see it?
Got it. Thank you, John.
Okay.
I don't know why I got this color and swatches thing up there.
It's your computer. It's screwed up, that's all.
What else?
Okay, we're going to do one more and then we'll leave for today. But this I want you to see because I think it's such a neat thing to do. Get the clouds panorama, click on it, hold the control key down and click on the Pueblo Pano so that you open both of those at the same time or just open them separately. It's in Adobe Camera Raw and I can come up to the upper left and there's a little drop down that says select them all so that or you could hold the control key and click on them. I just wanted both of them selected so when I come down to open, it says open images and I get both of the images open simultaneously. Now, so many times when I was shooting film, I didn't like the sky, but I'd have to wait around and hope clouds are coming in and Well, with Photoshop and now with other packages, Luminar 4, for example, you can put in sky so easily, but this is really easy to do. I will show you how to do this. You have this image. We want to select just the sky. So partial aspect of learning a selection. Over in your toolbar, 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down. If you hold down on that, you'll see that there are 3 tools there. One is called Object Selection Tool, Quick Selection Tool, and Magic Wand. Click on the magic wand. And the magic wand up in the options bar, you see that it says sample size. Make it 3 by 3. Tolerance, make it somewhere around 31 or 30. That's the usual for tolerance. Anti-alias checked. Nothing else checked, not contiguous or any of the others. Come down to the image, put the magic wand somewhere in the blue and click. And what it does is look for whatever whatever pixel I click on, the average of 3 by 3 pixels around it, and that color specifically with a tolerance of 31, which is fairly large. You see it, these other color areas here are not the same tone value of that or color value of that one, but you can hold the shift key and click more in the blue, a little bit more down in this blue, over. So now I see that it has selected the entire sky. Wonderful. I have the sky selected and only the sky. So now I click on the clouds, come up to the top left, select all. I want to pick up all the pixels in this sky. And the reason it's a panorama is because the image is a panorama. And if you had just a single shot cloud scene and you tried to put it into a panorama and then stretch it, it would look strange. So I have a folder of clouds, panorama clouds, vertical clouds, all kinds of clouds that I can use. In this case, a very neat panorama cloud that I want to put in there. Select all, edit, copy, and it copies it into a buffer. I don't need the clouds open anymore. It knows that I have it. Now, I have this image and the sky is selected. And I go up to edit, paste special, paste into, and it will paste it into the selection, which it did. And look over in the layers palette. I now have another pixel layer of the clouds. And if you look at the mask, let me open that mask for you. Because of the selection, it said, oh, well, you pasted into the selection, so you must not want the clouds to be seen in the bottom part, so it's pure black. And the white reveals where the cloud is. So let me hit the Alt or Option key again, click on the mask, we're back. Now you say, well, what happened to the clouds? Well, over in the toolbox, the top tool is the Move tool. Click on that, make sure that the cloud layer is selected, it's highlighted, look in the layers palette, bring the cursor over and just, whoop, got the wrong thing here. You need to be sure that you're not having the bracket around the mask, which is the mistake I just made. So for that layer with the clouds, I want to click on the little image of the clouds. So now the bracket is around the clouds. And since I have that, now when I move, I'm moving the clouds and I can place them however I want within this image. Now I would like them to be in such a way that this cloud on the left points down to this building and the clouds on the right are the dark mountain against the bright white clouds creates 3 dimensions. So I will keep adjusting this until I get the maximum use of that aspect out of this image. Now I have 2 layers, a background layer. Let me turn the eyeball icon off on the clouds. That's the way it was before. Turn the clouds on. There we go. Now I can do some additional things to this image. I will click on the background layer to select it. We'll get more into these things the next time, but here's the burn tool over in the toolbar. I want to get the burn tool up in the option bar. Keep the drop down as midtones at about 10, let's make it 15%, because I want to do it, don't want to do it all one stroke. I wanted to do it a little bit at a time. Left bracket key to make it a little smaller, and I want to make sure it's soft, which it is, and I run it smoothly across the bottom. Don't do this. Don't go back and forth, because it builds it up as you're doing that. Just smoothly across the bottom, smoothly. Now watch the difference of having that foreground darkened a little bit to push your eye, and you notice in the history panel I have multiple burn steps. But let me show you how that looks with the foreground bright. When I darken that, how much more your eye is pushed in. Now I'd like to darken the sky, so I come down and click on the sky layer, because that's where those pixels are, and make my brush a little bigger, and in midtones, run it across, so I'm really darkening the blue faster than the white in this image, because I'm doing only midtones. Now watch the difference of how your eye moves down. You notice I'm doing it in multiple steps. How your eye moves down into the image because I've darkened that top part to push your eye down. The last part on this, and the brush I want you to learn, is in the burn tool, you have dodge tool, burn tool, and sponge. And sponge allows me up in the options bar to saturate or desaturate a color. I want to saturate and wanted only a very low flow, maybe about 7%. And I'll make the brush a little softer. So I will hold the shift key, hold the shift key, just a minute, hold the, Come on, come on, come on, come on. Hold the shift key in the left bracket, makes it a little softer. Now make it a little smaller, not holding the shift key, so clicking the left bracket key. And I wanted to run it across just a portion of the building. Now, I'm doing this and it's not doing anything. Remember what I said? If you're doing something and it doesn't seem to be working, make sure you haven't switched the tool. No, still on a sponge tool. The options are the same. Oh, I'm over here in the layer palette. I'm not on the right layer. I want to change the building, which is in the background layer. So I click that layer to select it. And now when I bring the tool across the image, you see it's actually doing something to the image. Doing it in multiple steps. Let's look at how this was when it opened. So come back up to the top of the history. That's how it looked. And here's what we've done to it. Quite a difference. So I would even add an adjustment. And when you add an adjustment layer, it will add it to above whatever layer you have selected. I want it above layer 1. So I will select that layer, come up to adjustments, click on the second from the left in the top row, which is levels, take the middle slider, which is for midtones, and just darken the image just a little bit. I want to see the effect of this. I can turn the eyeball off on this properties, or I can come down to the layers palette, turn the eyeball off there. I like what that middle slider does, changing the midtones just a little bit. So now I have 3 layers, 2 pixel layers, and an adjustment layer. So folks, that's it for today.